Welcome back to my channel Rare Coins Shop. If you love discovering hidden treasures, you're in the right place. First, we're revealing some coins that could be worth way more than you think. Stick around to find out. New here? Like, subscribe, and let's dive in. We're diving into the fascinating world of the US Washington $quarter coin from 1970. This coin might look like just another regular quarter, but don't be fooled, this piece of history has a value that will absolutely surprise you. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll be amazed at how much a simple quarter could be worth. Let's rewind to 1970. The world was in the midst of a transformative time. The United States was dealing with political upheaval, social movements, and an evolving economy. The Washington quarter, first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, had become an iconic coin, loved by Americans for its depiction of the nation's first president. By 1970, this coin was firmly established as a staple of U.S. currency, and little did anyone know, some of the coins minted during this year would become highly valuable to collectors decades later. The design of the 1970 Washington quarter is simple but iconic. On the obverse side, you'll find the familiar portrait of George Washington, looking dignified as ever. Surrounding his profile are the words, "Liberty," and the inscription, "In God We Trust." Below Washington's portrait, you'll see the mint year, 1970, which marks the coin's release. On the reverse, the eagle, symbolizing strength and freedom, holds an olive branch in one talon and arrows in the other, all under the banner, United States of America, and the words, $quarter. While the Washington quarter has been produced in large numbers over the years, there's something particularly interesting about the 1970 release. In 1970, the U.S. Mint made a significant transition in its production process. The coins were struck with different levels of quality, and some have unique characteristics that make them more desirable to collectors. That means, while many 1970 Washington quarters were simply used for everyday transactions, a select few are now considered valuable collector's items. You might be wondering, what makes the 1970 Washington quarter stand out among all the others? The answer is a combination of rarity, condition, and the fact that certain variations exist within this coin series. In general, coins from 1970 are not especially rare, but certain examples, particularly those with certain characteristics or in pristine condition, can command impressive prices in the numismatic market. One of the key things to look for in a 1970 Washington quarter is its condition. As you can imagine, coins that were heavily circulated over time are generally worth very little, but those that have been carefully preserved are a different story. A well-maintained 1970 Washington quarter with sharp details, little to no wear, and a clean surface can fetch much higher prices. In fact, finding a 1970 Washington quarter in mint or uncirculated condition is a rare find, and that's where the value lies. What also makes this coin special is its role in the ongoing history of coin collecting. A coin like the 1970 Washington quarter, especially when in excellent condition, is not just a piece of currency, it's a part of American history. The value of coins like these grows over time as more and more collectors realize their significance. And here's where it gets really exciting. Some 1970 Washington quarters have been known to sell for amounts far beyond their face value, sometimes into the thousands of dollars, but there's more. There are a few other factors that can significantly increase the worth of a 1970 Washington quarter. One of the main things collectors look for are minting errors. While not all errors increase the coin's value, certain mistakes made during the minting process can make a coin particularly valuable. For example, if a quarter was struck off-center or had double strikes, it could become a highly prized find. Coins with these kinds of errors are rarer and more sought after in the collector community. So, if you have a 1970 Washington quarter that looks a bit unusual, it's worth taking a closer look. You could have a coin that stands out from the rest. So, what is the value of a 1970 Washington quarter? If you come across a well-preserved 1970 quarter, or even better, one with a minting error, the price can be quite substantial. Coins in good condition can range in value, but those in near-perfect, uncirculated quality can be worth much more. Now, you've stuck with us through all this coin talk, and it's time to get to the big reveal. A 1970 Washington quarter in uncirculated condition, or one with a unique minting error, could be worth as much as $65,000. Yes, you heard it right, $65,000. That's how much some rare 1970 Washington quarters have been known to sell for at auction. For something that started as just a regular piece of pocket change, it's amazing to think about how much value can be hidden in plain sight. So, what should you do if you think you have one of these valuable 1970 Washington quarters? First, take a good look at its condition. Does it still have that sharp, clear detail, and no signs of wear? Does it look like it's been carefully kept in good condition over the years? Next, check for any unusual features, such as off-center strikes or doubled designs. If you spot something that seems off, it might be worth getting your coin professionally appraised. An expert will help you determine its true value, and you might be pleasantly surprised by what it's worth. Second rare coin, we're diving into a coin that may look like just another quarter, but it holds far more worth than you might expect. Yes, we're talking about the 1974 U.S. Washington $quarter coin. While you may have seen these coins before, especially in your pocket change, this particular coin could be worth a small fortune. Stick around to the end, because the value of this coin will likely leave you speechless. Let's take a step back in time to the year 1974. The country was in the midst of change. Richard Nixon was still in office, and the U.S. was dealing with both domestic and international challenges. It was a year of economic strain with the energy crisis and inflation, and yet, the U.S. Mint continued to produce coins, including the Washington quarter, which had been in circulation since 1932. The quarter, featuring George Washington on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse, was a familiar sight in American wallets and purses. Now, when we look at the 1974 Washington quarter, it seems like any other quarter produced during that period, right? Well, that's where things get interesting. While millions of these quarters were struck in 1974, only a few select ones, in perfect condition or with certain unique features, can stand out as valuable collector's items today. So what makes the 1974 Washington quarter worth talking about? It all comes down to a combination of rarity, condition, and a few hidden factors that collectors look for. As with any coin, the value of the 1974 Washington quarter depends heavily on its condition. A coin that has been in circulation for years, bumped around in pockets and jars, will typically have some signs of wear, which can greatly reduce its value. However, a 1974 quarter that has been carefully preserved, free from heavy scratches, discoloration, or corrosion, can command a much higher price in the market. The sharper the details and the more pristine the surface, the better the value. But here's where the 1974 Washington quarter gets even more intriguing. Like many other coins, it's possible to find variations that make a certain quarter more desirable than the others. The U.S. Mint is, of course, a highly skilled operation, but mistakes can happen during the minting process, and those mistakes can actually increase the value of a coin. Minting errors, such as double strikes, misaligned dies, or off-center strikes, can make a coin a truly unique find. These errors can add a whole new layer of excitement for collectors. When you have a 1974 Washington quarter with one of these minting errors, you're not just holding a piece of currency, you're holding a rare piece of history. And as you can imagine, collectors are always on the lookout for such coins because they're not something you come across every day. Finding one of these error coins could mean a huge increase in value. While you may think of a 1974 Washington quarter as a common coin, the reality is that a well-preserved, high-quality example, especially one with a rare minting error, can be worth much more than just 25 cents. And that brings us to the big question: how much is the 1974 Washington quarter really worth? If you happen to have one of these rare, well-preserved 1974 Washington quarters, or perhaps one with an exciting minting error, the price can be astonishing. As you might expect, the coin's value increases significantly based on its condition and any special features it may have. Some of these coins can fetch prices in the thousands of dollars, but here's the exciting part: the right 1974 Washington quarter, in top condition or with a significant minting error, can be worth as much as $50,000. Yes, you heard it right, $50,000. it's truly incredible to think that a quarter, something most of us probably overlook in our day-to-day lives, could be worth such a substantial amount. The 1974 Washington quarter is a great example of how the world of coin collecting holds endless surprises, and sometimes, those surprises can be very, very valuable. So, what should you do if you think you have a rare 1974 Washington quarter on your hands? First, carefully inspect the coin. Is it in pristine condition with little to no wear? Does it have sharp, clear details? If so, you might just be holding onto a valuable treasure. Then, keep an eye out for any unusual features or minting errors. Look for off-center strikes, doubling in the design, or any other irregularities. If you spot something that seems out of the ordinary, it might be time to get the coin professionally evaluated by a numismatic expert. These professionals can help determine the true value of your coin and ensure that you're not sitting on a rare find that you didn't even know you had. Coin collecting is a world full of surprises, and sometimes, those surprises come from the most unexpected places. The 1974 Washington quarter is a perfect example of how the coins we encounter every day could hold hidden value. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just getting started, be sure to keep an eye out for these rare and valuable coins. You never know what you might find in your spare change. Third expensive coin, we're diving into one of the most fascinating coins in American history, the 1967 Washington quarter. It may seem like just another quarter at first glance, but trust me, this coin has some serious value potential. Stick around to the end, because we're about to reveal a surprising fact about the 1967 Washington quarter that could have you looking at your spare change in a whole new way. Let's take a moment to step back to 1967. The world was a very different place. The United States was deep into the space race, with NASA's Apollo 11 mission just 2 years away from landing the first man on the moon. The country was also dealing with social movements, from the civil rights struggle to the early stages of the counterculture revolution. Amid all this change and excitement, the U.S. Mint was still busy producing coins for everyday use, and the Washington quarter was no exception. The Washington quarter, first minted in 1932 to honor the country's first president, had been a staple of American currency for decades. In 1967, the coin's design had remained relatively unchanged for over 30 years, still bearing the classic image of George Washington on the obverse and a majestic eagle on the reverse. At first glance, the 1967 Washington quarter looks like any other coin of its time. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all 1967 Washington quarters are created equal. The value of a coin, especially one as common as a quarter, is often determined by its rarity and condition. While millions of these 1967 quarters were minted, only a small fraction of them were preserved in perfect condition or have unique characteristics that make them stand out to collectors. What makes the 1967 Washington quarter so special is that it's one of the last quarters minted before a significant shift in the U.S. Mint's production process. The following years would see coins made with different materials, and some of the 1967 quarters were produced with special features that collectors now find highly desirable. First, let's talk about the design. On the obverse side of the coin, you'll see the familiar portrait of George Washington, who has graced U.S. quarters for decades. The words "Liberty" and the year 1967 are also inscribed, along with "In God We Trust" beneath his portrait. On the reverse, you'll find the image of a bald eagle, wings outstretched, holding an olive branch and arrows in its talons, with the words "United States of America" and $quarter surrounding it. It's a classic design that remains timeless to this day. While these coins were produced in large numbers, finding one in excellent, uncirculated condition is what makes the 1967 Washington quarter special. Like any coin, the more wear and tear it has, the less valuable it becomes. Coins that were heavily circulated, dropped, scratched, or exposed to the elements aren't likely to fetch a high price. But if you've got one of these quarters in near-perfect condition, shiny, with crisp details, and no signs of age or wear, it could be worth a small fortune. But here's where it gets even more exciting for collectors. There are some 1967 Washington quarters that were struck with minting errors, mistakes made during the manufacturing process that resulted in a one-of-a-kind coin. These errors could include double strikes, off-center minting, or even missing design elements. For collectors, these error coins are highly prized because they're unique, and they can be worth far more than their standard counterparts. Some of the rarest 1967 Washington quarters have been discovered to have serious minting errors, which could send their value skyrocketing. A double strike, where the coin is struck twice in the same place, or an off-center strike, where the design is misaligned, can turn an ordinary quarter into a highly sought-after treasure. Now, let's get down to the part you've been waiting for, the value of the 1967 Washington quarter. On average, you might find one of these quarters selling for just a few dollars if it's in decent condition. But here's the kicker: a 1967 Washington quarter in mint or near mint condition, especially one with a rare minting error, can be worth so much more. How much more, you ask? Well, if you have a pristine 1967 Washington quarter, or one with an exciting error, it could potentially be worth as much as $100,000. Yes, you heard that right, $100,000. That's how much some rare 1967 Washington quarters have been known to sell for at auctions or private sales. It's incredible to think that something as small and simple as a quarter could be worth six figures, but that's the beauty of the world of coin collecting. So, what should you do if you think you have one of these valuable 1967 Washington quarters? First, take a close look at its condition. Is it nearly flawless, with sharp details and no visible signs of wear? If so, you could have a valuable coin on your hands. Second, check for any unusual features or minting errors. Does it look off-center or have double strikes? If so, it might be time to get your coin evaluated by a professional. A numismatist or coin expert can help you determine the coin's true value, and they might even give you a higher estimate than you expect. In conclusion, the 1967 Washington quarter is a perfect example of how a coin that seems so common can hold tremendous value. Whether it's the exceptional condition, rare minting errors, or just the right combination of factors, this little quarter has the potential to be worth a lot more than you might think. Now, we're talking about a coin that might look pretty ordinary at first glance, but trust me, it's anything but. We're diving into the 1983 U.S. Washington quarter dollar coin, a piece of currency that holds more value than you might think. So, grab your magnifying glass and your collection of old coins, because we're about to uncover why this coin is worth much more than its face value. Stick with us until the end to find out just how much this quarter could be worth today. To understand the value of the 1983 Washington quarter, we first need to set the stage for the year it was minted. It's 1983, and the United States was in a period of economic recovery following the 1981 to 1982 recession. The country was seeing a rise in inflation, and the Federal Reserve was adjusting interest rates to combat rising costs. Meanwhile, in the world of coinage, the U.S. Mint was busy producing the everyday coins Americans relied on for transactions, including the Washington quarter. The Washington quarter has been in circulation since 1932, honoring George Washington, the first president of the United States. The quarter's design has remained relatively unchanged over the years, with Washington's portrait on the front and an eagle on the reverse. By 1983, the coin had become an integral part of the American monetary system, so you might think that finding a 1983 quarter would be no big deal. But that's where you're wrong. This quarter holds some surprising value for collectors. Let's talk about what makes this particular 1983 Washington quarter so special. First, like any coin, its value is influenced by its condition. If you come across a 1983 quarter that's been worn down by years of circulation, it likely won't fetch much more than its 25-cent face value. But what happens when you find one in near-perfect, uncirculated condition? That's when things start to get interesting. Collectors love coins in mint condition because they represent an example of the coin as it was originally intended to look when it was first struck. A well-preserved 1983 quarter, with sharp details and no wear or damage, can be a much more valuable find than a coin that's been passed around and used in everyday transactions. So if you happen to have a 1983 Washington quarter that's still gleaming with its original shine, you might just have a valuable coin on your hands. Now, let's go beyond just the condition of the coin. While most of the 1983 Washington quarters were minted in large quantities, certain factors can make a coin from that year more desirable to collectors. One of those factors is the mint mark. The 1983 Washington quarter was minted in two locations, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia minted coins don't carry a mint mark, while the Denver minted quarters have a D mint mark to indicate their place of production. It's important to note that some collectors are particularly interested in the Denver minted coins, as they tend to have slightly lower mintage numbers than their Philadelphia counterparts, which can add to their rarity and appeal. But there's one more factor that really sets the 1983 Washington quarter apart: minting errors. As with any coin, mistakes can happen during the minting process, and those errors can turn a run-of-the-mill quarter into a highly sought-after rarity. Minting errors can come in many forms, such as double strikes, off-center strikes, die cracks, or even missing designs. These errors can make a coin one of a kind, and collectors are always on the lookout for those unique pieces. For the 1983 Washington quarter, minting errors can dramatically increase the coin's value. A quarter with a noticeable error could be worth significantly more than the standard issue. Imagine finding a 1983 Washington quarter with a double strike or a misaligned die. A coin like that could become a collector's dream and could be worth far more than you'd expect. So now, you're probably wondering, just how much could a 1983 Washington quarter actually be worth? Well, let's talk about it. Most 1983 quarters you'll find in circulation are worth, at best, a few dollars if they're in good condition. But if you're lucky enough to come across a well-preserved quarter with a low mintage number or one with a minting error, the value can skyrocket. A pristine 1983 Denver minted quarter with a rare error or exceptional condition can be worth much more than you could ever imagine, and here's the moment you've been waiting for: the 1983 Washington quarter, especially one with a rare minting error or in impeccable condition, can be worth as much as $77,000. Yes, that's right, $77,000. It's hard to believe that a quarter, something you might toss into a vending machine or use to make change, could be worth that much. But that's the beauty of coin collecting. Sometimes the smallest pieces of currency hold the most significant value. So, how do you know if you have a 1983 Washington quarter worth thousands of dollars? First, examine the coin's condition. Is it flawless, with no signs of wear or discoloration? If so, it might be worth more than you think. Next, check the mint mark to see if you have a Denver minted coin. Finally, carefully inspect the coin for any minting errors. If you spot anything unusual, whether it's a double strike, off-center strike, or any other irregularity, it could be the key to unlocking its true value. If you think you might have a rare 1983 Washington quarter, the best thing to do is take it to a professional coin dealer or numismatist for evaluation. They can help determine its value and give you a better idea of whether you've stumbled upon a hidden treasure. In conclusion, the 1983 Washington quarter is a perfect example of how something as ordinary as a quarter can be worth much more than its face value. Whether it's the coin's condition, its mint mark, or a rare minting error, there are plenty of factors that can make this coin a valuable collector's item. So, next time you come across a 1983 Washington quarter, be sure to take a closer look. You might just be holding on to a small fortune. Last unique coin, we're talking about a classic that you might have missed, the 1986 Washington $quarter coin, minted in Denver. At first glance, it might seem like just another quarter, but trust me, this little coin is far from ordinary. In fact, if you've got one of these in your collection, you might be sitting on a fortune. Stick with us until the end to discover just how much this 1986 Denver Mint coin could be worth today. Let's rewind to 1986. It's a pivotal year in American history. The country was in the midst of the Reagan era, with the economy showing signs of growth after the early '80s recession. But beyond politics and economics, the U.S. Mint was also busy producing coins that would go into circulation for everyday use, including the Washington quarter. The Washington quarter, named after George Washington, has been in circulation since 1932, making it one of the longest-running coins in U.S. history. And while many of these quarters came and went without much attention, the 1986 Denver Mint coin is one that stands out among the rest. What makes the 1986 Washington quarter so intriguing? Well, it all comes down to a few important factors: rarity, condition, and even some very specific minting details. But before we dive into all of that, let's take a closer look at the design of the coin. The 1986 Washington quarter features the classic design that's been around since 1932, a portrait of George Washington on the front, with the words Liberty and the year 1986 inscribed. On the reverse side, there's the familiar image of an eagle in flight, with the words United States of America and $quarter surrounding it. It's a design that has become iconic and symbolic of the United States, and it's one that's familiar to almost every American. While the design remains unchanged year after year, what truly affects the value of the 1986 Washington quarter is the rarity and condition of the coin. Although millions of these quarters were minted in 1986, only a small number are preserved in pristine condition. Coins that have been through years of circulation, tossed in pockets, dropped, or exposed to wear and tear, often lose their value over time. That's why collectors are always on the lookout for coins that are well preserved, with sharp details, no discoloration, and no signs of damage. Finding a 1986 quarter in excellent condition is what truly makes it valuable. So, if you happen to have one that's still in pristine shape, shiny, with all the details crisp and clear, this could be the jackpot you've been searching for. But there's more to the story than just condition. If you take a closer look, you'll see that some coins are even more valuable because they have unique features or minting errors that make them stand out. For the 1986 Washington quarter, there are a few variations that collectors love. Some quarters were struck with slight design flaws, such as a double strike or an off-center minting, which can make them highly sought after in the coin collecting world. Coins with these types of minting errors are often seen as one-of-a-kind treasures, and collectors are willing to pay a premium for them. If you happen to stumble upon a 1986 Washington quarter with a minting error, you could be in for a significant windfall. So, what makes this particular 1986 Denver minted Washington quarter so interesting? The key lies in its rarity. While the coin was produced in large numbers at the Denver Mint, certain coins, especially those in exceptional condition or with rare minting errors, can command a much higher value. The 1986 Denver Mint coins were part of a large mintage, but as time goes on, finding one in uncirculated condition or with an error becomes rarer. And in the world of coin collecting, rarity equals value. Now, let's get to the part you've been waiting for, the price. How much is the 1986 Washington quarter really worth? The value can vary depending on the coin's condition, the minting error, if any, and the demand from collectors. A typical 1986 Denver minted quarter in average condition may not fetch much more than a few dollars, but if you have a well-preserved example, or better yet, a rare minting error, then you could be looking at something much more valuable. And here's the exciting part: if you happen to have a 1986 Washington quarter in near-perfect condition or one with a rare minting error, you could be looking at a coin worth as much as $77,000. Yes, that's right, $77,000. It's incredible to think that a single quarter could be worth so much, but that's the beauty of rare coins. The value of a coin isn't always about its size or age. Sometimes, it's about the specific details that make it unique. So, what should you do if you think you found a rare 1986 Washington quarter? First, inspect it closely for any signs of wear and tear. Is it in near mint or mint condition? If so, you're off to a great start. Then, take a moment to check for any unusual characteristics, whether it's a minting error, such as a double strike or an off-center design. If you find something out of the ordinary, it might be time to take the coin to a professional for evaluation. In conclusion, the 1986 Washington quarter-dollar coin is a perfect example of how something seemingly ordinary can turn out to be a rare and valuable treasure. Whether it's the coin's pristine condition, a unique minting error, or just the rarity of finding such a coin in today's world, this quarter has the potential to be worth far more than you ever imagined. So, the next time you're flipping through your coin collection or digging through your spare change, take a closer look at those 1986 Washington quarters. You just might be holding onto a small fortune. Thanks for joining us on today's coin discovery journey. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on more exciting coin finds. Who knows, your next treasure could be worth more than you ever expected.